Part 49. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishita D. Chapter 482. It can only be said that it is worthy of being a god-level civilization, and it still has the strength it should have. With the technology of cosmic harmonious resonance, the Krista people can at least be at home in all kinds of idealistic civilizations. On the other hand, the Krista people have made great achievements in the technology tree of chaos. Whether it is the chaos crystal wall used for defense or the probability cloud that uses flickering particles to hide itself, they are all very practical technologies. Of course, Gao Qiang did not want to do anything with the Krista people's technology tree this time. At least not now. He still hopes that the Krista people can bring enough pressure to him. However, although the Krista people are a god-level civilization, their own various technologies are quite luxurious, but Gao Qiang still has a skeptical attitude. Because he just checked the attributes of the fleet and knew how terrifying his fleet that has experienced 30 cycles of technology blessing is. Ancient form. Introduction. The strike ships made to imitate ancient existences have been tempered by the years, and the edge of these warships has not faded. Toughness, 1,000,000 add 600,000, loop technology, plus infinity, out of dimension. Avoidance rate, 1% add 30%, loop technology. Armament, bubble launcher, singularity projector, phase interference cannon, swarm missile. Although Gao Qiang has not seen the original legacy fleet of the territory so far, but he has speculated the terrifying nature of the opponent from these interface attributes. The dimension defense capability possessed by the Sunset Fleet is also possessed by the ancient form strike ship, the only difference is group and single defense, that's all. Apart from the defense capability, the armament of the ancient form is obviously more luxurious than that of the Sunset Fleet. Even the seemingly weakest bubble launcher has a capability that cannot be underestimated. Bubble launcher. Effect: launch a large number of time bubbles to temporarily block enemy kinetic weapon projectiles or reduce the speed of the enemy fleet. Even the bubble launcher uses the early time technology. The rest of the singularity projectors, phase interference cannons and the like. They have the terrifying power to create a micro black hole at the attack destination and to disconnect the opponent's ship material from the real world. With the terrifying combat power of the ancient form, Gao Qiang couldn't help but wipe a cold sweat for the Krista people. If the other party came without any preparation, will they die? With deep distrust of the Krista people, Gao Qiang suddenly had an idea and made a decision. Gao Qiang immediately called out Yonghui's unmanned mothership. Sensing Gao Qiang's call, Yonghui's mothership immediately connected to the communication channel of the space station. Please issue the mission, and the Yonghui fleet is on standby for you at any time. After coughing twice, Gao Qiang said with some heaviness, "We have a new enemy again." The Yonghui mothership immediately responded, "Please give us the enemy's coordinates." At present, the Yonghui mothership's self-inspection production capacity is good, and the combat potential is judged to be high. Please rest assured, the Yonghui fleet will fight for you until the last moment. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes slightly. Does the Yonghui mothership have a strong production capacity? Then he would be relieved. If the Yonghui warships were not renewable, he might still feel a little reluctant. I sent the coordinates to your host. As he spoke, Gao Qiang passed the route of the Krista people from the star map to the Yonghui mothership. After the powerful core calculation of the Yonghui mothership, it was quickly calculated that the final destination of this fleet was exactly the coordinates where Gao Qiang was. The threat has been confirmed, and all unmanned warships are expected to be dispatched. Prepare for battle. Except for the Yonghui mothership, all Yonghui unmanned warships have entered the jump mode preparation stage. At the same time, the strong energy fluctuations also attracted the attention of the Krista people. Communication messages flashed quickly in the crystal network. It's coming towards us, is it an enemy? Not sure, but be prepared for battle. Facts have proved that the Krista people's vigilance was not wrong. Countless space explosions appeared in front of the Krista people, and the Yahweh unmanned battle group directly jumped to the route of the Krista people. Communication messages continued to flash in the Crystal network. It looks like an Omnic fleet. Those guys are hostile to all civilizations except silicon-based life. Let's launch an attack directly. As a god-level civilization, although the Christians usually don't care about worldly affairs, they still have some understanding of the universe. Omnics, like them, have hearts made of iron and stone. But the difference between them and the Christians is that they just want to bask in the sun peacefully on weekdays, while Omnics are more warlike. The war of Omnics is a great challenge to their existing resources. If it weren't for the use of ultimate strategic weapons all day long, the Omnics might have already become a god-level civilization in the Dark Ages. Facing such a race, even if the Christians are already a god-level civilization, they dare not slack off. They are in the recovery period of the jump, so take advantage of it now. A thought flashed through their minds, and the Christians directly launched the ultimate strategic weapon they carried, the Absolute Command. A strong light flashed, covering all the afterglow fleets that jumped in front. Then countless shattering sounds rang out, and a piece of crystal jungle grew out of thin air in the universe. All the Yahweh warships that touched the crystal jungle were assimilated by the jungle and transformed into colorful crystal products. Strike force detected, preparing for dimension folding. Failed to fold, failed. Crack. After the subtle fission and resonance sounds, the Yahweh fleet that folded to the battlefield was almost completely destroyed along with the crystal jungle. Countless tiny crystals scattered around. When everything settled, nothing was left in the universe. In the space station, Gao Qiang looked at the picture transmitted back by the star map and breathed a sigh of relief for the Krista people. It can only be said that they are worthy of being a god-level civilization. They are not on the same level as the intelligent machines they had contacted before. And looking at the battle situation in front of him, Gao Qiang also understood why the dream chose the Krista people to help him awaken. As a god-level civilization, the Krista people's technology tree almost ignores any defensive capabilities. After searching the Krista people's technology tree again, Gao Qiang learned. What they just used should be the final strategy of the order route in their technology tree. Executor, Absolute Command. Effect, reversely affect the resonance of the universe, directly rewrite the basic laws of reality in some areas through the will of the user, but there may be serious consequences. The reason why the Sunset Fleet was unable to perform dimension jumps before should be because the basic laws were temporarily rewritten. For the Krista people, the Sunset Fleet is more like a small episode on the road. The ignorant intelligent fleet can't imagine the realm of god-level civilization at all. Don't pay attention to them. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi. Chapter 483. Alarm, approaching of a fleet of god-level civilization detected. Alarm. When the alarm sounded at the space station, several days had passed since the destruction of the Yahweh fleet. Although the movement speed of the Krista people was not slow, it was still far behind the dimension jump of Yahweh. During this period, in order to prevent the Krista people from being distracted, Gao Qiang even suppressed the Yahweh fleet and did not allow the Yahweh fleet to continue to take the initiative to attack. Of course, this also came at a price. Gao Qiang opened the star map and glanced at the periphery of his territory. Because the Yahweh fleet had not been dispatched in the past few days. With the dual support of inventory materials and black hole decompressors, the Yahweh fleet produced by the Yahweh mothership reached a terrifying number. It was difficult for Gao Qiang to calculate the exact number, because so far, the number of Yahweh fleets was still growing rapidly. Even these fleets had formed a circle of dark purple star rings outside Gao Qiang's territory. Many races saw this scene. But facing this huge star ring surrounding several star systems, no civilization around dared to act rashly for the time being. Please rest assured, The Sunset Fleet will fight for you until the last moment. The comforting voice of the Sunset Mothership appeared from time to time in the space station. In this regard, Gao Qiang can only hope that the Krista people will arrive early. As long as the threat is not lifted, the proliferation of the Sunset Fleet will not stop. With sufficient resources, they will replicate themselves indefinitely until the moment of eliminating the danger. If the Krista people move slower, Gao Qiang is afraid that they will not be able to deal with the next Sunset Fleet. At this time, the light points representing the Krista people in the star map finally have a trend of approaching Gao Qiang's territory. Is it finally here? Gao Qiang breathed a sigh of relief. The number of Sunset Fleets is not too outrageous at present. As a god-level civilization, the Krista people should be able to clean up these fleets, more than enough, right? Gao Qiang looked at the huge star ring composed of warships, thinking uncertainly. At the same time, the Krista people were also approaching the safe zone location they saw from the information. Seeing the countless Sunset Fleets blocking the periphery of the safe zone, they confirmed the accuracy of the intelligence. The Kristans were communicating with each other in the crystal network. It seems that the coordinates of this safe zone are real. But the Omnics got ahead of us. They could recognize that the afterglow guarding the safe zone was the Omnic fleet that attacked them earlier. Are there any information about other god-level civilizations? No, it seems that other god-level civilizations are still hiding. Then we should strike first. The Kristans quickly determined the strategy. In the Dark Ages, the god-level civilizations maintained a relative tacit understanding. Because their size is too large, it is completely unprofitable for both sides to get involved in a war. So unless there is a deadly feud, the god-level civilizations will not easily fight to the death. If the Kristans occupy the first safe zone first, those god-level civilizations that are still waiting will naturally give in. So if you want to avoid further war, it is very necessary for the Kristans to take the first safe zone. At this time, the Afterglow fleet also noticed the arrival of the Kristans. Threat found, unauthorized unit, clear. With the mothership's order, countless fleets of the Afterglow rushed towards the Krista group. At the same time, there was also an overwhelming artillery fire that was enough to illuminate the entire galaxy. They have begun to attack, everyone prepare to fight back. The thought flashed through the crystal network of the Krista people. Then the empty space in front of them suddenly exploded and shattered. Countless tiny crystal structures flew out in the space explosion, growing rapidly in front of the Krista people and connecting with each other. Finally, a colorful and complex geometric structure was formed. This is the product of their Chaos technology tree. Chaos Crystal Wall. Effect: extract activated chaos crystals from space, and form an indestructible barrier by refraction and distortion of incident energy. At this time, countless artillery fire from the Afterglow fleet hit the Chaos Crystal Wall, forming a ripple-like energy fluctuation. But spiral geometric figures also appeared on the surface of the crystal, and the figures kept changing, as if they were adjusting in real time to deal with the incoming attack. Unfortunately, the firepower network of the Afterglow fleet was too dense. After holding on for a while, the Chaos Crystal Wall created by the Krista people also seemed to be unable to hold on. Sharp cracking sounds continued to sound in the Chaos Crystal Wall. Cracks gradually surged up the crystal wall. Finally, with the continuous sound of subtle clicks, large pieces of Chaos Crystal Wall shattered and turned into tiny chips that scattered everywhere. Seeing this, the Krista people immediately issued an order in the crystal network. The firepower of this batch of intelligent fleets is too strong, prepare to use the final strategy. They were ready to repeat the old trick and continue to use absolute law to quickly clear the Yahweh fleet. But this time, the Yahweh mothership, which had been prepared for a long time, would not give them this opportunity. Support the fleet, enter the dimensional folding preparation. With the lesson from the last time, the Yahweh mothership did not let its unmanned fleet enter the dimensional folding. because it knew that the opponent's final strategy was enough to cut off their way into a higher dimension. In that case, we might as well fight to the death. Whoosh! As the space explosion appeared, countless Yahweh warships directly crossed the Chaos Crystal Wall and rushed into the Krista people's line, engaging in close combat with the Krista people. This almost reckless offensive made the Krista people temporarily give up the idea of using the absolute law. At this stage, if they use the absolute law, they themselves will be included in the target of attack. This kind of weapon that affects the basic law cannot be controlled to not harm friendly forces. Command effective, repeat the command. Seeing that this round of offensive successfully caused some losses to the Krista people, the Yahweh mothership immediately took advantage of the victory and tried to replicate the success just now. But the next second, a huge dimensional crack was torn open in the center of the Krista people's line. Countless manic breaths surged out of the crack. Those breaths were like huge petals slowly unfolding, revealing the flashing energy vortex inside. Countless strange chaotic creatures poured out from the buds and began to clean up the Yahweh fleet located in the Krista people's line. At the same time, the absolute law in the rear was used again. In just a moment, countless fleets of afterglow were broken into crystals by the absolute law of the Kristans. In the crystal network, the mocking voices of the Kristans were heard at this time. Don't those intelligent machines think that there is only one ultimate strategy used by the God-level civilization? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me. Chapter 484. That's right, the Kristans just pulled out their second most commonly used ultimate strategy. Chaos seeding from the Chaos Technology Tree. Chaos sowing. Introduction. The Kristans' highest achievement in crystal engineering research. This cross-dimensional technology will completely change the nature of the battlefield. Effect. Tear apart the barriers of reality, create rifts leading to the dimension of chaos, and summon a large number of random chaotic entities and incarnations of chaos. As the opposite of order, the Chaos Technology Tree possesses quite disorderly power. It's just using the power of other dimensions, which is nothing to the Kristans. What's more, what the Yahweh fleet is fighting now is not complete chaos. At this time, the Kristans had stopped entangled with the Sunset fleet, and all the clusters retreated behind the stamen. After repelling the Yahweh fleet's offensive, no new chaotic entities appeared in the stamens for a long time. It's like it's gestating something. The next moment, a dark and deep tentacle suddenly appeared from the stamen and swept towards the Yahweh fleet. The length of the tentacle, which exceeded the radius of the star system, destroyed tens of thousands of afterglow battleships almost instantly. So strong. Inside the space station, Gao Qiang couldn't help but praise. The opponent that Wyman chose for him was indeed good. The two technology trees of order and chaos that the Kristans are proficient in are almost impossible to defend. From the current point of view, under the combined attack of the two final strategies of the Kristans, the defeat of the Sunset Fleet is only a matter of time. As long as you don't use the Burning Core. Then the next step should be for the Kristans to defeat the Sunset Fleet and then advance triumphantly. Finally, they broke through the strict defense of the ancient fleet and brought destruction to several inhabited planets in the high-strength territory. Then, it's time to wake up and turn the tide. Gao Qiang has already thought up all the scripts, and looking at it now, Krista the actor will not let him down. When Gao Qiang was thinking this, he heard a pop. A figure fell down next to him. Is it a wet dream? What's wrong with you? Gao Qiang suddenly reacted. While asking aloud, he squatted down to check the status of his wet dream. But he saw that Wyman had a frightened expression at the moment, and was lying on the ground, his body shaking constantly, and he looked very uncomfortable. It's now like this, so there's no need to scare me, right? Gao Qiang said helplessly. He had been frightened by wet dreams so many times that he almost lost his resistance. However, facing Gao Qiang's boring words, Wei Meng stood up from the ground without being disappointed. She was still leaning on the ground, maintaining her previous movements, and even had a few drops of cold sweat dripping from her forehead. Gao Qiang was stunned for a moment. "Are you serious this time? Looking at the wet dream, it doesn't look like it's fake." Gao Qiang tried to put his hands on Wei Meng's body. The expected scene of the wet dream suddenly changing its face to scare people did not come. Wei Meng still maintained that posture, his body was trembling a little, and he had no reaction to Gao Qiang's touch. "What's going on?" After finally confirming that something was wrong with the wet dream, Gao Qiang immediately put aside the matter of observing the movements of the Christians. How can a so-called God-level civilization be more important than a mythical creature of its own? At this time, Zhu Luo came from the side and glanced at Wet Dream's posture. At the same time, he gave his own evaluation. It looks like a prey being noticed by a predator, with fear and a little helplessness. The posture of prey detected by predators. Gao Qiang frowned. If the person in front of him were Calamity, it would be reasonable. But the person lying on the ground now is a wet dream. For a dream weaver, what is there that is enough to scare her? But there is no use thinking about it now. Since the reason for falling down due to wet dreams is fear. Gao Qiang suddenly sat down, lifted Wei Meng up, and held him in his arms. "Wow, Lord, can't you bear it anymore?" Shasha's voice came from the side. At the same time, she covered her eyes with her hands, leaving only a large gap that could not cover her curious gaze. "Why can't you bear it?" Gao Qiang responded angrily. But when he lowered his head, he found that the wet dream was obediently leaning in his arms, but the situation still didn't improve. Obviously, high strength does not bring any sense of security. "What's wrong with this big sister?" Calamity's young voice came from Gao Qiang's ears. She approached Gao Qiang and looked at Wei Meng's face with curious eyes. Suddenly, Calamity opened its arms. "Calamity, let me give you a hug." As soon as the words fell, Wei Mei grasped the disaster as if grasping a life-saving straw. Only then did the fear in her eyes gradually begin to dissipate. In the end, I was sweating all over my head and breathing heavily. "What happened to you just now?" Gao Qiang asked Wei Meng with some concern. Wei Meng turned around and found that she was lying in Gao Qiang's arms, and she was silent for a long time. But she had no intention of leaving Gao Qiang's arms for the time being, and instead answered Gao Qiang's question. "It's chaos incarnate. I never realized before that the Christians could actually use their own technology to create new myth-like life forms." Yi Meng raised his head and looked at the position of the star map. The tentacles in the stamen were still raging in the universe, and it seemed that the Yanghui fleet was about to collapse. At the same time, behind the tentacles, there were more bodies trying to pass through the cracks and enter the real dimension. It was him. Yi Meng's eyes were a little panicked. He broke into the dream I wove through the medium of the Krista people. Just now, I felt a strong sense of powerlessness. I have never felt so small and helpless. Speaking of this, Yi Meng looked at the disaster in his arms. If it weren't for her, I might have been dragged into the chaos and completely perished. The mythical life form created by the Krista people is so strong. Gao Qiang frowned and asked Yi Meng, "Can you find a way to prevent that chaos incarnation from affecting you? If necessary, you can use all the existing materials in the territory. Even if we cancel the dream weave for the Krista people now, our goal will be achieved soon." However, Yi Meng still shook his head. "No way, I have no way. As I told you before, the dream I wove successfully can only be broken free of with my own perseverance. As long as the Krista people don't want to wake up from this nightmare, the dream will exist forever. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire?" Author, Mi Shi De. Chapter 485. Actually, my sense of security won't last long. The light in Wet Dream's eyes dimmed a bit. As long as the dream weaved still exists, the incarnation of chaos will continue to corrode me. In a few hours, I will be completely swallowed up into chaos. Nothing can save me, and no one can save me. Wyman looked at the position of the star map and shook his head as if mocking himself. Is your goal almost achieved? At this point, whether I am dead or alive, it will not affect your plan. The Christian army will come to the city as you wish. As for what you want to do next, that is all your business. I just didn't expect that after playing with countless lives, I would end up here, in the hands of a created mythical life. Speaking of this, a trace of loneliness flashed in Weime's eyes. Gao Qiang watched every move of Wet Dream in his arms, and suddenly asked, what if the incarnation of chaos is no longer there? What do you mean? Wyman turned his head, as if he had guessed something, but a little unbelievable. She knew that Gao Qiang's purpose was to use foreigners to exert enough pressure on his own territory. It turns out that the Christians can actually do this, too. But this is based on the Christians possessing the incarnation of chaos. If the Christians lose the ultimate strategy of the chaos technology tree, breaking through the Sunset Fleet's blockade in a short period of time will be a problem. Not to mention bringing enough pressure to the high-power territory. Gao Qiang can naturally see this. Once he chooses to fight against the Christians with all his strength, the plan of letting the Christians oppress themselves for awakening will fail. There is no problem in choosing other God-level civilizations to help you awaken. But the real problem is, there's not enough time. The number of existing wonders in the universe today is rapidly decreasing. Without the opportunity of the Christa people, Gao Qiang may not be able to realize his awakening before all miracles disappear. As for the Wet Dream, when she was a dream weaver, she killed countless lords and was not considered a good person. Becoming a powerful leader is something you are forced to do, and your loyalty has always been just around the passing line. Is it worth giving up your plans for such a wet dream? Gao Qiang doesn't know. But he has already summoned the interface to burn the core. At this moment, Gao Qiang only knew that he wanted to do this, so he did it. Zhuluo on the side has been watching the situation here. From the moment Gao Qiang summoned the burning core, she had already raised the corners of her mouth. Yes, right and wrong are never excuses to limit them, right? The ancestors used countless sweat and blood and tears to leave a shadow to protect them from wind and rain, so that they no longer have to work hard and live unscrupulously. As the lord of the fallen empire, Gao Qiangruo seemed timid. Then wouldn't the efforts of countless forefathers who have made great efforts have been in vain? At this time, Gao Qiang also tried to use anti-entropy rays that burned the core to attack the incarnation of chaos while the Yunhui fleet was still alive. As the anchor point was determined, a beam of light suddenly appeared and disappeared. When it was regenerated, it was already in front of the incarnation of chaos. The speed was so fast that even the Christians were completely unable to react and could only watch the anti-entropy rays hit the body of the incarnation of chaos. It seems that we have more than one enemy. Communication among the Christians flashed across the Hedron network, and they also noted the location where the attack was launched. Reverse gene chain, failed. Aging processing, failed. Fail. In front of Gao Qiang, the burning core flashed countless instructions, but in the end almost all of them ended in failure. It is obvious that there is no evolutionary path for life forms in the quasi-mythological life created by the incarnation of chaos. Born to be powerful is this kind of existence. It seems that through degradation, we can't deal with this guy, Gao Qiang said silently. Gao Qiang casually closed the anti-entropy ray interface, and changed the core burning mode to technology tree cropping again. Now, he wants to see which branch to cut off in order to eliminate the influence of the current incarnation of chaos. Multidimensional analysis technology? No, that's not right. Cutting out this technology shouldn't affect the incarnation of chaos that has already arrived in this world. So reality reconstruction theory? It doesn't seem that right. Soon, Gao became lost in the complex technological tree of the Christians. Building the ultimate strategy of chaos sowing and successfully summoning chaotic entities is not something that a small branch can accomplish. This spans multiple main parts of the technology tree and uses the theories and technologies of various branches to finally be realized. In other words, no matter which branch of the technology tree Gao tries to cut, it is impossible to directly deal with the current incarnation of chaos. Could it be that we really could only watch the wet dream being swallowed by chaos? After awakening, can we deal with the incarnation of chaos created by the Christians? Gao looked at the wet dream in his arms. But he saw that the luster in Mei's eyes was fading. At this moment, the incarnation of chaos is still trapped in the dream weaved by wet dreams. Yimen becomes stronger when it encounters a weak opponent. The chaos incarnation is obviously not something Yimen can handle. If the dream and the chaos incarnation are not cut off quickly, Yimen may not be able to hold on for too long under the erosion of chaos. But, what should I do? Just when Gao was anxious, a familiar voice suddenly connected to the communication channel of the space station. Lord, do you need help? Is it, Xiaobai? Gao raised his head and saw Bai Hexio's figure appearing on the other side of the communication channel. After not seeing each other for a long time, Bai Hexio's face turned a little pale, and the whole person did not seem as energetic as before. The most important point is that Bai Hexio did not seem to come as fast as before. Seeing Gao hesitate to speak, Bai Hexio took the initiative to say, if Lord doesn't need help, then I will go to deal with the invaders outside. At this time, Gao saw Bai Hexio's current identity through the interface of the people. Captain of the Eternal Shadow. Eternal Shadow Voidship. Introduction: wandering on the edge of existence and nothingness, landing at the intersection of dimension and reality. Holding the scepter of entropy, wielding the blade of time. The Eternal Shadow is not just a simple flagship, but a moving singularity. Only the bravest or the most foolish civilization dares to challenge the Eternal Shadow, the reflection of fate. Toughness, 8 million × 3 million, circular technology. Auxiliary configuration, 4 annihilation reactors, quantum thrusters, FTL dimension folding engines, adaptive phase shields, virtual particle storm arrays. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 486. Weapons: Heat Death Main Cannon, Quantum Entanglement Disruption Matrix, Causal Breaking Pulse Launcher. As there is only one flagship in existence, the configuration of Eternal Shadow is indeed unmatched by other warships. The only thing that might be considered a shortcoming is that Eternal Shadow loses the defensive method of dimensional warping. Of course, with Bai Hexio's temperament, he wouldn't like to use this kind of defensive method. Then, Lord, please wait for me for a moment. Bai Hexio waved his hand, and his figure disappeared from the communication channel. At the same time, combat instructions were also received in Eternal Shadow. Expand the virtual particle storm and create a fast driving channel. A cylindrical line composed of light spots erupted starting from the Eternal Shadow. At the next moment, it extended outwards and penetrated the chaotic crystal wall in front of the Christian formation at extremely fast speeds. What has traveled through time? No, the chaos crystal wall is not damaged. Isn't that thing a weapon? In the crystal network, the Christians fell into a heated discussion when faced with the sudden appearance of a path composed of a storm of virtual particles. However, based on the direction of the technology tree of the Christians, it is completely unclear how the virtual particle storm will go. This is already the ultimate technology on another route. The Christians gradually became serious. They paid attention to the afterglow that had almost fallen into destruction under the double blow of the chaos entity and the absolute law. Could it be that there is another god-level civilization hidden behind these omnics that they don't know about? This is not impossible. In the Dark Ages, all civilizations tried to hide themselves as much as possible, even God-level civilizations were no exception. But what if there is really another God-level civilization behind these omnics? So the current situation of the Christa people is a bit troublesome. In the eyes of the Christians, this was a war initiated by themselves. In other words, they were the first to break the rule of not engaging in death battles between God-level civilizations. At this time, the Eternal Shadow Void ship arrived at the battlefield carrying 300 ancient shape strike ships. In terms of quantity, the number of this fleet is simply not enough for a battlefield of this size. But the Christians did not let down their guard. The virtual particle storm passed directly through the intact chaotic crystal wall, and sending the current fleet to the Christians had already proved their power. Why don't you launch an attack? In the Eternal Shadow Bridge, Bihexio looked at the Christians who were still wary of him and gave the next order without hesitation. Since you choose to remain silent, I won't be polite. He has never had a good habit of waiting. Main gun heat death, preparing for launch. Heat death main gun. Effect, attack hostile targets in a wide range, accelerate the decay process of the contacted unit, and make it quickly enter the heat death stage. Seeing the Eternal Shadow's main cannon blazing brightly, the Christians did not dare to neglect at all. Arrogance is not something to be celebrated in dark times. Prudence is the best way to win. Quickly, hold up the second chaotic crystal wall. Under the organization of the crystal network, the void space exploded again, and countless crystals grew out, forming a spectacle in the universe. Although the scale of the second chaotic crystal wall is not as huge as the one created when facing Yahweh, but the attack used to defend against the Eternal Shadow should be enough in the eyes of the Christians. At this moment, Eternal Shadow's heat death main gun was also ready. Emission. When the heat death main gun was fired, the entire space seemed to be holding its breath. What it emits is not a dazzling beam of light, but some kind of deep shadow. It seems to be quite slow, but in fact it is completely faster than the speed of light. The moment the chaotic crystal wall came into contact with it, cracks began to appear on the surface. No violent collision occurred. The power of the heat death main gun penetrated the entire chaotic crystal wall almost instantly, and swept towards the cluster of Christians behind without any attenuation. For all Christians who come into contact with the shadow, the outer layer of the colorful crystal stone undergoes drastic changes without exception. The tones on their bodies began to darken, and their structures began to collapse, as if they could travel hundreds of years in milliseconds. Immediately afterwards, a small flow of dust appeared on the surface of the crystal, scattering towards the universe, until the parts that came into contact with the shadow were completely weathered. But for Eternal Shadow, this is not the end, but just the beginning. Just now, Bihexio issued new instructions again. Causal link breaking pulse preparation. Cause breaking chain pulse transmitter. Effect, emit special pulses to temporarily cut off or overlap the causal relationship of group units. The Eternal Shadow violently fired out arc-like attacks, connecting the Christians who had entered the heat death stage with the rest of the cluster. As arcs of electricity continue to flash across the universe, more and more Christians are forced into the heat death phase. Their lives are passing quickly, and this process cannot be reversed by any means. Realizing that their opponent was actually using the initial law of causality weapon, the Christians finally began to panic. No matter which civilization is concerned, causality weapons are a great threat, and they must not sit idly by. In an instant, a decision had been made within the crystal network. Quickly, control chaos to sow seeds to counterattack. I saw the incarnation of chaos on the front line that was destroying the Afterglow fleet, suddenly froze and changed direction to attack the Eternal Shadow. In response, Bihexio just glanced coldly at the picture transmitted by the radar. Quantum entanglement disintegration matrix preparation. As the order was given, the moving body of the Chaos Incarnation suddenly stopped, and twisted blocks appeared on the tentacles of the Chaos Incarnation. Immediately afterwards, a shrill wail came from inside the monster full of tentacles. His body was being separated from his body piece by piece. This is naturally what the quantum entanglement collapse matrix does. The quantum entanglement disintegration matrix can disintegrate the connection between regions. Therefore, it seems that the incarnation of chaos is in a complete space, but in fact, it is scattered into tens of thousands of rectangular square spaces. These spaces are not connected and cannot accommodate the sheer size of the chaos avatar. There is only one choice for this. That is dismemberment. The wailing sound of the incarnation of chaos suddenly stopped, and then the whole body turned into huge limbs and spread out into the universe. As the aura of chaos weakened, the scattered body parts gradually dissipated completely. You actually won. In the space station, Gao Qiang saw the scene through the star map. The mythical life-form Chaos Incarnation was actually instantly killed by the Eternal Shadow's secondary weapon without even using the main gun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 487. Did he overestimate the god-level civilization? That's right, after all, it's just a god-level civilization in name only, not an omniscient and omnipotent god. Thinking of this, Gao Qiang suddenly realized something. That is, even if Yimen didn't get into trouble, his plan wouldn't seem to succeed. Although the Yunhui fleet couldn't resist the attack of the Krista people, once the Krista people completely entered their territory. When the Eternal Shadow was dispatched, the Krista people would still be in the current situation. Forget it. Gao Qiang sighed. Let it fail, it's just an idea anyway, who can guarantee that he will succeed every time? If you want to blame, you can only blame himself for being too strong. Speaking of the death of the Chaos Incarnation, Yimen should be fine, right? Thinking of this, Gao Qiang smiled and pushed Yimen's shoulder in his arms. Are you still sitting on the ground and not getting up? Are you still addicted to hugging disaster? Facing Gao Qiang's sudden push, Yimen did not respond. Instead, disaster turned his head and looked into Yimen's eyes. She seems to be dying, disaster whispered. What? Gao Qiang turned Yimeng's body around, puzzled, only to find that Yimeng's eyes were already somewhat gray. But, wasn't the Chaos Incarnation killed? Gao Qiang looked at the star map and confirmed that the Chaos Incarnation had been completely destroyed. Now, under the leadership of the Eternal Shadow, even the stamen that gave birth to the Chaos Incarnation was destroyed. The Afterglow fleet also regrouped and began to launch a counter-attack against the remaining Chaos entities. Both the Krista people and the chaos they created had failed. So, why was Yimeng still like this? Just when Gao Qiang was thinking hard and could not get any results, the space station suddenly carried a dark color. Countless strange patterns crawled all over the interior walls of the space station, and the originally extremely bright lights also seemed a little dim and colorless. Seeing this scene, almost all the technicians in the command room stood up. We were pulled into a dream, someone reminded. Since everyone was pulled into the dream while awake and aware, this dream cannot deceive anyone. As long as they want to leave here, they can leave at any time. At this time, the technicians in the control room looked at each other, and half of them chose to leave the dream directly. The other half chose to stay, to protect Gao Qiang and see what was about to happen. Did you do it? Gao Qiang looked at Yimeng, whose eyes were still gray, and she could not answer any of Gao Qiang's questions. Lord, look at the screen, Sasha's excited voice came from the side. Gao Qiang looked in the direction of Sasha's voice. I saw that the large screen in the center of the control room lit up at some point and adjusted to a screen with only a flower screen. Amid the sizzling sound, a tentacle suddenly stretched out and attacked Gao Qiang. Be careful! It was still Juluo who was quick-witted and rushed Gao Jiang and the other two away, so that the tentacle caught nothing. After the attack failed, the tentacles did not pursue the victory, but stopped, as if they were brewing something. At this time, Gao Jiang could also see the tentacles clearly. It was different from the tentacles of Haituazi in the feudal era. Haituazi's tentacles were full of flesh and looked elastic and cute on weekdays. But the tentacle stretched out from the screen in front of him was a completely virtual limb. The aura of chaos surrounded this tentacle, which only gave people the feeling of tyranny and destruction. Facing the chaotic aura of the tentacles, Shasha, who was standing aside, went against the current. With a manic momentum, he came close to the tentacles and bit them. But no one expected it. Facing Shasha's bite, the tentacles did not fight back, and did not even dodge. Just let Shasha lie on him and bite him. And after a moment of silence, the first thing he did was to communicate. A string of human words appeared on the screen where the tentacles stretched out. I will only take her away and will not hurt anyone. The other party actually knows human language and can communicate with humans. But now is the Dark Age. Suddenly thinking of something, Gao Jiang turned his head and looked at Yimeng. He thought this should be Yimeng's doing. If it is now in Yimeng's dream, then everything makes sense. The tentacles at the moment represent chaos. Although the incarnation of chaos died in reality, Yimeng's dream seems to have not successfully escaped from chaos. Only by pulling everyone into his dream can everyone know what Yimeng's dream world is experiencing. But you want to take it away, Sasha. Gao Jiang pointed at Sasha biting the tentacles, and the atmosphere in the space station became even colder. One technician stopped his actions, and Juluo also looked at the screen with strange eyes. It seems that if the other party dares to respond, something bad will happen. But facing Sasha pointed at by Gao Jiang, the screen only replied with one word. No. Not Sasha. Not Sasha, but still use the word her to describe her, and chaos specifically calls for someone. You want to take Yimen away. Gao Jiang pointed at Yimen in his arms. The only thing he could think of at the moment was Yimen. Yes, her dream trapped me here. Take her away, chaos will go away, and will not harm any of you. Looking at the message that appeared on the screen again, Gao Jiang felt that the control room was not as cold as before. After many technicians confirmed that Gao Jiang was not in danger, they just glanced at Yimen indifferently and left the dream. Soon, except for Yimen himself, only Gao Jiang and Sasha remained in the dream. Did everyone else leave? Gao Jiang was silent for a long time, but he had a guess in his heart. Even if Yimen was transformed into his own people, it was different from other initial people after all. Those people might care a little about Gao Jiang's life and death. But once it was confirmed that Gao Jiang was not in danger, then no one wanted to care about Yimen's life and death. Perhaps if it wasn't for biting chaos a few more times, Sasha would have chosen to leave at this time. What if I say I don't agree? Gao Jiang asked suddenly. At this time, the tentacles moved again. What do your thoughts have to do with me? Chaos is chaos after all. Even if they gain the ability to communicate through the dreams woven by Yimen, they will not compromise and trade with the means of order. If you don't agree, just kill them all. Let me go. Yimen, who had not responded for a long time, suddenly spoke. You, Gao Jiang looked at his arms in disbelief. Yimen's eyes were a little clearer at this moment, but there was still deep fear in the bottom of her pupils. Chaos was still eroding her dreams, and it didn't stop at any moment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 488. Although I also want you to save me, Yimen said. But what can I do? You are just a human, a weak human. Without the protection of those people around you, you should have been eaten by me in the last game. Yimen looked very hard when she spoke, But facing the slowly extending tentacles, she still tried her best to say everything. I didn't lose to the Krista people, let alone some mythical life form. From the beginning to the end, I lost to you, and lost to those people's unlimited protection for you. I lost a long time ago, didn't I? What's the difference between saving and not saving? After shouting the last sentence hysterically, Yimen suddenly stood up and stuffed the disaster into Gao Qiang's arms. Then she pushed Gao Qiang away and faced the arrival of chaos alone. The despair in her eyes was finally about to condense into substance. She knew what her weakness was. Even in the woven dream, she could not fight against the chaotic entity created by the Krista people. This is the biggest weakness of the weavers. When you are fearless, the existence that needs to be feared becomes the weavers themselves. And chaos, as a dimension created by the Krista people and a war weapon, obviously will not be afraid. Yimen knew that she would lose, and she also knew who could save her. But the people who could save her had already left. Watching the tentacles getting closer and closer, Yimen almost completely gave up resistance and let despair envelope herself. It was her mistake to provoke the Krista people. But it doesn't matter. After all, she had already lost. The moment she was caught in the insect net by Gao Qiang, she had already lost. Enough! Gao Qiang suddenly shouted angrily. Everyone only protects me, what's the matter? The scenes of the past flashed in Gao Qiang's mind, and Gao Qiang also recalled a power that he had forgotten for a long time. That power that did not belong to him. Kabbalah Source V Severity. When the black ball was still there, he could summon roots to protect himself. But the appearance of the root vine has nothing to do with the black ball. The root vine's source of power comes from the anti-Kabbalah tree of life. Gao Qiang once saw him in his dream. His body supported the world, but it only brought corruption and destruction. At that time, Gao Qiang almost became a part of the tree, and it was the black ball who helped him to successfully save Gao Qiang. But now, Gao Qiang wants to embrace his power. It was also in a dream at that time, and it is also in a dream now. Since it is all in a dream, why can't he become stronger occasionally? Lord, your body. Zhulo's shocked voice came from behind Gao Qiang. Gao Qiang looked down and saw that just when he had the idea of embracing the anti-Kabbalah tree of life, his body actually began to wrinkle. His vitality was fading, but his thinking did not stop. Gao Qiang slowly closed his eyes, and when he opened his eyes again, he saw his dry body. So what is he now? Gao Qiang's consciousness moved and saw his current appearance. A tree man made of scarlet roots, some of whose branches were connected to the blood vessels of his original body. He successfully embraced the anti-Kabbalah tree of life, and obtained the power of roots and corruption without going through the black ball. He just had this thought, but he actually succeeded. Gao Qiang was a little unbelievable. Even in a dream, this is too easy, isn't it? After all, it's just a thought. Or is it that the anti-source V cruelness has never left him? Of course, now is not the time to entangle these. Gao Qiang stretched out his withered fingers and pointed at the dream that was about to be caught by the tentacles. Protect her. Countless scarlet blood-red roots grew out from all directions, surrounded the dream, and directly wrapped the dream into a sphere. The tentacles tried to push the roots away, but the roots were like stubborn stones, motionless. The roots even grew sharp thorns with a broken breath, trying to resist the tentacles. The tentacles paused for a moment and began to shrink backwards. And every time the tentacles shrank an inch, the scarlet roots would erode forward an inch. Until the tentacles stopped retreating, the two had formed a two-legged situation in the control room. One side was shrouded in the breath of scarlet and corruption, and the other side was the breath of chaos and destruction. The two confronted each other, and the situation was deadlocked in an instant. Seeing this scene, Gao Qiang was delighted. It seems that he guessed right. How terrifying the picture he saw in the dream was. The anti-Kabbalah tree of life almost swallowed up half of the planet, and all life fell into corruption under its erosion. Such an existence, even if it is not a mythical creature, its actual combat power will not be much worse. But suddenly, the voice of Yimen came from the sphere wrapped in the roots. His target is only me. Do you think you can save me alone with the power of dreams? Do you know how stupid you are doing? As the voice fell, the tentacles changed again. There was no new communication this time. It seemed that the strong resistance and the corrupt smell of the roots had completely angered the chaos in front of him. The tentacles threw Sasha, who was biting on the body, away. Then it split into 8 petals from the middle, forming a ferocious mouth. His speed was more than 10 times faster than the previous slow state. Almost in an instant, he attacked the root vine. The scarlet root vine tried to resist, but was bitten to pieces the moment of contact, and began to fall off in large sections. Gaoqiang did not really become a tree after all. Therefore, the corrupt power of these root vines is far from reaching the limit they can reach. Resisting chaos is still too difficult. And the offensive of chaos is still intensifying. As the tentacles bite frantically, chaotic entities gradually begin to form. Those chaotic entities rushed into the control room and began to attack the root vines with all their might. The root vines also generated guards to resist, but even the root vine units carrying automatic weapons can only struggle to support under the attack of chaotic entities. On the other hand, after the tentacles broke through the outer defense of the root vines, they did not focus on the hard-to-chew shell that wrapped the dream. Instead, he turned his attack directly to Gaoqiang, the culprit. His wisdom fully understood that as long as Gaoqiang was killed, the roots and corruption would definitely fade away. Gaoqiang wanted to dodge, but found that he couldn't move at all at this moment. Because of the power of the tree, Gaoqiang temporarily possessed the characteristics of the tree at this moment. His roots were like fixed dead, firmly rooted in the ground. And because his body was completely withered, it was completely unable to dodge the attacks of chaos. In the sphere wrapped by the roots and vines, Yimeng sighed slowly, and the despair in his eyes did not diminish. You can't save anyone, you can't even save yourself. Seeing that Gaoqiang was about to be hit, the disaster next to Gaoqiang pursed his lips, unable to hold back his emotions. He burst into tears with a wow sound. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 489. The cry was deafening, seeming to make the listener sad and cry. You have triggered the disaster feature Ancestral Asylum, and a powerful ancient marine force is making a jump. At this moment, a space explosion suddenly occurred in the control room. The Marine Corps Knights have been temporarily included in your command. Guardian Knight? Such a familiar name, Gaoqiang always felt like he had heard it somewhere before. Then at the next moment, units wearing heavy mechanical armor walked out of the space explosion. They held heavy cannons half as tall as a man in their hands and fired at the chaotic entities in the control room without hesitation. Boom boom boom. As the sound of gunfire sounded, the raging chaotic entities were directly shot away and gradually dissipated in mid-air. Seeing this scene, the tentacles that were attacking Gaoqiang paused and immediately changed direction and attacked the unit that Gaoqiang considered to be a higher threat. I saw a protective knight being thrown high by the tentacles, and then the tentacles instantly bit up. The thick armor worn by the Skitarii knight shattered under the attack of chaos. The protective knight among them was bitten into several pieces. Snap! Broken limbs fell to the ground piece by piece. But the appearance of these body parts is a bit unusual. After being torn apart, these body parts did not completely fall into silence. Instead, black tendrils of flesh were growing out of his corpse. Under everyone's gaze, the corpses slowly crawled towards other parts of themselves. Immediately afterwards, the tendrils began to meet and close together. The guardian knight who had just been torn into pieces stood up again. Saw such a strange and penetrating scene. Gao Qiang finally had an impression. Isn't this an ancient remnant of the troops in his territory during the feudal period? In addition to the equipment becoming more advanced, the immortality of these guardian knights seems to still exist. Etc. Gao Qiang suddenly thought of something, opened the interface of the guardian knight, and looked at a feature in the guardian knight panel. Holy proverb, these devout knights will only die after the gods they believe in. Now that the immortality of the guardian knight is in effect. So does that mean? Just when Gao Qiang thought this, a huge black rectangular block rolled out from the space explosion. Then, two cute little eyes appeared on the fleshy square. The moment he saw Gao Qiang, his eyes suddenly lit up. Whoa! Gao Qiang only felt that a black mountain of flesh was coming towards him. The shock in his mind caused Gao Qiang to break his skills instantly. The power of corruption is moving away from him, and the scarlet roots are gradually closing in. Along with it, Gao Qiang's consciousness also returned to his body. The moment he returned, Gao Qiang felt like he was wrapped in a fleshy body. Okay, so crowded. It was as if he heard what Gao Qiang said. Gao Qiang felt a push, pushing his head out of his fleshy body. Only then did he see what the current scene looked like. In the dark giant square, a pair of bright eyes were looking at him. But Calamity had already stopped crying and was happily bouncing on him, like playing on a trampoline. Are you Black Tuanzi? Gao Qiang asked uncertainly. Whoa! Part of Haituanzi's body was elongated, and he came forward enthusiastically and rubbed Gao Qiang's face. Because Gao Qiang was wrapped in Haituanzi's body, he could only let Haituanzi rub around. Haha, it's so itchy. But why have you become so big again? Gao Qiang looked at Haituanzi's current size, which was completely different from the petite and mini feeling he had when he was taken out of the war game. When it was the largest in the feudal era, I'm afraid it was only as big as it is now. Whoa! Listening to Haituanzi's response, Gao Qiang smiled bitterly and shook his head. That's right, he couldn't understand what Haituanzi was saying at all. However, at this moment, the tentacle attack interrupted the warm scene. The ferocious mouth that split into 8 petals had already bitten down at Haituanzi, who was unable to evade in the small control room because of his size. Oops! Seeing this scene, Gao Qiang secretly said something bad. But now it's too late to summon the root vine again. Because chaos has successfully bitten Black Tuanzi. Black Tuanzi's 2 small eyes trembled with watery eyes, showing a bitter expression. Then Gao Qiang felt his eyes go dark, and his whole body was completely wrapped in black balls, and Jasha and Juluo were also dragged in. Then Haituanzi glanced at Wei Meng, and after thinking for half a second, he quickly stretched out his tentacles and pulled Wei Meng into his arms. At this moment, everyone's vision became pitch black except for Calamity. And Calamity is still playing with the trampoline on Haituanzi. Hey, it's fun. Unexpectedly, it was clear that the incarnation of chaos was biting Haituanzi at this moment, but Calamity showed no fear at all. Even after everyone was wrapped in the black dumpling, Calamity reached out and patted the black dumpling's flesh. Then he pointed at the incarnation of chaos and said in a sweet voice, "Tuanzi, beat him." Whoa! Black Dumpling made a very cute demonstration sound. But the environment in the control room suddenly changed in stark contrast to the sound. Countless ferocious eyeballs rolled out from the wall. Eyeballs spread to every corner of the stream at a very fast speed. In every gap where the hatch was opened, behind every power-off display screen, you could see rolling fleshy eyeballs. And, on the body of the black ball, due to direct viewing data deletion, you have gained the SAN value attribute. Your SAN value -10. Your SAN value -10. When Chaos felt something was wrong, the scene had been completely reversed. The black ball, which had just looked cute and elastic, had now torn into countless terrifying big mouths, as if waiting for the arrival of food. And the tentacles that were biting the black ball had just thought of letting go, but were bitten hard by countless fleshy mouths and could not move. Such a horrible scene was seen by Disaster, but Disaster still did not cry. At this time, she had stopped playing trampoline on the black ball. Raising his chin slightly, Disaster looked at the screen extended by Chaos with a strange side eye. Disaster is really scared, so Disaster wants to protect himself better. Hey! Can you please die? Since the second time he was wrapped in the black ball, Gao Qiang lost consciousness. He felt like he was dreaming. In the dream, he floated in a chaotic and empty space, unable to sense up and down, and unable to distinguish north and south. Until a certain moment, countless blood threads began to flow into chaos. He wanted to stay away from those blood threads, but the speed of the blood threads spreading was too fast, leaving him no chance to escape. Just then, the nightmare woke up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 490. Gao Qiang sat up violently and took a deep breath. Yes, is it a dream? After waking up, the scene in Gao Qiang's dream quickly faded from his mind. Dream, dream. Talking about his dream, Gao Qiang suddenly reacted. I actually fell asleep in Haituan's arms. Haituan's embrace is really too safe. The feeling of being completely wrapped without any blind spots gives people an overwhelming sense of security. But Gao Qiang knew that now was not the time to recall the embrace of Haituan's. How's the wet dream going? Gao Qiang asked subconsciously. In response, Zhulogo's smiling voice came from the side. Why don't you see for yourself? Gao Qiang looked over in confusion and saw Zhulogo stretching out a finger and pointing in another direction. In the direction pointed by Zhulogo's finger, Wei Meng stood there intact. The despair in her eyes had completely faded away, and her wet dream had returned to its energetic look. Judging from the occasional technicians walking around, they must have escaped from the dream state of the wet dream. Wei Meng looked at Gao Qiang and explained, everyone has woken up long ago. Then he sighed, held his forehead and shook his head. But the way you keep sleeping and not wake up scares the others. Ahem. Gao Qiang coughed twice awkwardly, not knowing what to say. With a roll of his eyes, Gao Qiang changed the subject and said, so, chaos has been solved. Hearing these words, Haituanzi immediately jumped out, picked up Gao Qiang from behind, put him in his arms and rubbed him as if he was taking credit. Whoa! Yes, it was solved. He should have done it. Wet Dream looked at Haituanzi meaningfully. This dream she had was really wonderful. First it was eroded by chaos, then parasitized by corruption, and finally it attracted unspeakable consequences. Wet Dream estimated that in the next few thousand years, he would never have such a wonderful or terrifying dream again. Speaking of. Suddenly, Wei Mei turned her head aside and looked at the distant isle. At the same time, he whispered, thank you, ordinary human being. Your subjects' wet dream will increase their loyalty to you by 20. At this time, Gao Qiang opened the civilian interface and found that Wei Meng's loyalty to him had reached 87. The loyalty level of 87 points is almost the same as most of Gao Qiang's subordinates. It seems that after this chaotic incident, Wei Meng has slightly changed his mentality from his original status as a prisoner. At least she recognized Gao Qiang, an ordinary human being. Actually, ordinary humans don't need to talk about it at all. Gao Qiang couldn't help but complain. As a result, as soon as he finished speaking, the control room received a communication from the Eternal Shadow from the outside world. Baihexio's face appeared in the communication channel. At the same time, there was also the scene of the full retreat of the Christians. After losing a lot of combat power and consuming various ultimate strategic weapons, they still failed to achieve actual results. The Christians finally gave up their attack on Gao Qiang. But this also announced that Gao Qiang's plan failed. The power of a single god-level civilization is not enough to suppress the powerful to the point of awakening, at least not the Christians. A few days later, calm returned to the space station. Chaos seems to be just a small episode, and no one will mention it anymore. Gao Qiang, on the other hand, lay on the table like a salty fish, holding his face and sighing at the star map. There are fewer and fewer miracles in existence. The 15 days expected by Zhuoluo have long passed, and Gao Qiang still has no good way to get himself into an awakened state. Therefore, he could only watch helplessly as the number of miracles, 170,000, approached zero step by step. As of now, there are only 3 miracles left in the entire universe. Gao Qiang didn't know why there were 3 miracles left behind. But it can be predicted that these remaining 3 miracles will quickly disappear if the secret society wants to. Wet dream, do you think we still have a chance to achieve a miracle? Gao Qiang couldn't help but ask. No chance, Wei Mei answered honestly. Wei Meng has been sitting next to Gao Qiang and accompanying him these days. But after all, neither she nor Gao Qiang are Time Lords, and they don't have the ability to break a second into an hour. Racing against time is too unrealistic. Even if it is a dream weaved by a wet dream, it is impossible to say that the time of the universe can be set back. Lord, are you still thinking about something? Zhuoluo's voice suddenly came from behind Gao Qiang. At the same time, a cup of soy milk was handed to Gao Qiang by Zhuoluo. Freshly ground soy milk should make the Lord feel better, right? Zhuoluo said with a smile. Soy milk. Gao Qiang was lying on the table with no appetite for drinking. If he had not successfully advanced to the miracle path, this dark age would have been in vain. Although this small setback did not cause any real loss to Gao Qiang. But a little bit of disappointment still exists. Seeing that Gao Qiang didn't drink, Zhuoluo wasn't in a hurry, so he just waited by the side with the soy milk. After a while, the huge figure of Haituanzi appeared behind Gao Qiang. He still has Salsa and Disaster hanging on his body. Among them, the Disaster just lay quietly on top of Haituanzi. Sasha stepped on the oval arms of the black ball, constantly trying to pull out the barbecue that the black ball had eaten. Finally, the barbecue was split in 2, and Sasha fell to the ground. However, Sasha didn't care about it. Hee. Sasha hummed twice with pride, like a victorious general, ready to enjoy her spoils. But at this moment, a dazzling light appeared outside the space station, and a powerful energy wave swept across the entire universe. After being brushed by the energy wave, the black ball's body suddenly shook like a wave. Wow wow wow. The black ball stretched out 2 oval arms and gestured back and forth, as if he wanted to express something. But his movements were too obscure. Until a technician suddenly interrupted the black ball's movements. Report, we found a communication message sent to the public screen. Sent to the public screen. After hearing this, Gao Qiang was a little more energetic. The so-called public screen is actually a declaration to the entire universe, like a secret society. This kind of thing is rare in the Dark Ages. But Gao Qiang didn't expect that he would encounter this situation twice in a row not long after entering the Dark Ages. And this time, this new communication facing the public screen seems to be more aggressive than the secret society. After trying to invade the communication channel of the space station without success, a light engraved into the spiritual consciousness appeared directly in the control room, which could not be blocked or ignored in any way. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 491. The light changes shape in mid-air. Sometimes he turns into an angel, sometimes he turns into a demon, and sometimes he turns into the appearance of some race that even the most powerful people don't recognize. Soon, that look became human. The human being transformed by the light is a neutral image without hair. He is looking at everything in the world with indifferent eyes. It's actually them. Wei Meng frowned and said. Do you know them too? Gao Qiang looked at Wei Meng curiously. Wei Meng nodded. During the several decades I spent in the Dark Ages, I have seen most of the civilizations here. As she spoke, she pointed to the shimmering human figure in the center of the control room. In the Tianming civilization, ordinary lords generally call the individuals of their race radiant bodies. They are one of the rare races that use concepts as their life form. Their concept is light. Wet Dream's tone of voice became more serious. If we follow the concept of the Dark Ages, the development level of the Glory clan is enough to be called a god-level civilization. But they are different from other god-level civilizations. Other god-level civilizations are limited to this Dark Age. And the Glorious clan, even after leaving this Dark Age, they still have a life form that transcends matter. Do you take the concept of light as your life form? Gao Qiang repeated. He knew that Wei Mei said so much to warn him not to take advantage of the Glorious clan. In essence, there is an unbridgeable gap between the Glorious clan and the Christians. Speaking of which, he had actually seen this type of race before. It's just that the race he saw earlier is called Time. Nodding slightly, Gao Qiang told Wei Meng that he already knew what she meant. Then he turned his head towards the location of the radiant body, preparing to see what the other party wanted to say when he projected the image into his space station. Not only Gao Qiang, but also almost everyone in the control room who was free at this moment also set their sights on the radiant body. I'm afraid it's not a good idea to come here uninvited, right? Zhuoluo said with a faint smile. However, in the face of Zhuoluo's questions, the radiant body located in the center of the control room did not make any response. Because at this moment he has a human form. So he raised his hands in a human posture, and countless patterns formed by light emerged in his hands. After those patterns appeared, they began to rotate repeatedly around the radiant body. Are you completely ignoring yourself? Zhuoluo narrowed his eyes slightly and said nothing more for the time being. And facing the pattern given by the radiant body, Shasha chewed the barbecue and looked at it for a long time, then suddenly said, Shasha may know what he means. It seems like he has something to tell us. As she spoke, Shasha approached the radiant body, pointed at a spiral pattern, and explained to everyone, for example, this pattern should represent the universe. How about Shasha, can you help us translate again? Gao Qiang tried to ask. If you don't enter the dream through the means of the dream weaver. Perhaps only Shasha can understand what the sudden arrival of Tianming civilization wants to express. Okay. Facing Gao Qiang's request, Shasha nodded casually. Then he looked carefully at the patterns floating around the radiant body. While checking the patterns floating by, Shasha chewed the barbecue and translated it matter-of-factly. All living things in the galaxy, please hear us. We are Tianming civilization, the incarnation of light, the eternal enforcers of justice. We have been observing you for a long time and have witnessed your history, your wars, and your failures and depravity. Gao Qiang's ears twitched. How come the previous words sounded normal to him, but the last sentence seemed to have some meaning? Are you sure that's what he said? Gao Qiang asked suspiciously. Sasha glanced at the pattern that had floated by, chewed the barbecue and said hesitantly, probably. Snort. At this time, a technician in the control room snorted coldly. I found out that the so-called Tianming civilization only has a history of 1,000 years. I don't know, I thought it was an old thing that came out of nowhere. After the control room became quiet again, Shasha continued to translate the text floating around the radiant body. Now the darkness that has shrouded the entire universe has descended, and the haze of secret societies is spread over every race. You have let us down. When life and death are at stake, you would rather swing the butcher knife at the weaker ones and snatch the little charity thrown by the darkness, rather than rise up and resist. But it's different now. Tianming civilization will officially declare war on the secret society, and all of you must work with us to end the upgrading of the universe and end this catastrophe. At this moment, Jologo suddenly interrupted, I want to ask, what if we don't agree? I don't agree, let Shasha take a look. Shasha circled the radiant body several times and said, oh, I found it. Then she began to translate. You have no choice. All your arrogance are just bubbles that we can easily destroy. If you choose to give up this only opportunity and choose to turn your back on the light, then the light will deprive you of everything you have. Your glory will disappear, you will usher in ruin, and you will eventually become a speck of dust in the universe. Clang. The sudden sound attracted everyone's attention. The soy milk held in Jologo's hand accidentally fell to the ground when Shasha finished translating everything. Tisk. Jologo clicked his tongue lightly, and then said, sorry. It's just that for a moment, I felt offended. With that said, Jologo squatted down and began to process the soy milk poured at his feet. From glory to ruin, and the dust in the universe, she whispered softly. In the control room, many technicians also fell silent, lowering their heads one after another, with an inexplicable look flashing in their eyes. Gao Qiang didn't know what happened. But he felt that after hearing what Shasha said, he was not very happy either. There was no reason for that feeling of annoyance. Until the next moment, the war game prompt suddenly popped up. Your subject Sasha triggers the entry, perfect diplomat. Your territory, wall of size, insulted by unknown units, falling into a state of rage. Wrath, a piece of information from an unknown source makes all the people under your command feel angry and humiliated. The naked words spoke directly to their pride and self-esteem, making the fire in their hearts burn brightly. All differences will be put aside for the time being. At this moment, only one sentence is enough to express everyone's will. They will all fall at our feet.